Hello, I'm Mark. I'm one of the Health and Safety Advisors for GF Tomlinson. Today I'm speaking with Pauline Latham, OB and MP, about the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust, which is our chosen charity for this year. Thank you for visiting us today. Firstly, please may you explain what the Aortic Dissection Charity Trust is?
Yes, well, the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust is a charity we set up 3 years ago because nobody knows about aortic dissection. They don't know what it is until it devastates their family. I found out about it when my son died from it, age 44, out of the blue, knew nothing about it. And what people don't realise, they think it's rare, but over 2,000 people a year die from it, more than die on the roads in England and Wales.
Wow.
So it isn't rare. There are also about 4,000 people a year saved who are diagnosed, but in my son's case, he went into hospital. They sent him home after 4 hours saying, if you know better, come back in the morning. He was dead by then. So he died at home in the night. And the strange thing is, not one person in the family had ever heard of it, and I bet many people in Tomlinson's won't know about it, but many people in Tomlinson's will actually know somebody who's died from it, but not been aware of that. And so what we decided to do was set up the charity, and there are 3 of us, the trustees, one a medical doctor who's a consultant who's done aortic dissections his whole life. The other is, the chairman is a lady called Catherine, whose father died from a misdiagnosed aortic dissection, and they told her that there was nothing they could have done about it. It's very rare. And yet on the day of her father's funeral, her aunt had one. And coincidentally, nobody told the hospital there where she was what it was, but they did diagnose it. She had the surgery and she's fine. Whereas her father was misdiagnosed again. And they just said it's unusual and we couldn't have done anything, which is not true.
No. So what are the signs and symptoms for this aortic dissection, and what are the risk factors with this?
There are several risk factors. One, you can have an underlying disease like Marfan syndrome, there's something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which predisposes you to having it. Doesn't mean you will, but that you're more likely to if you've got one of those underlying diseases. The other thing is if you've got high blood pressure, and many of us have high blood pressure, and particularly a young man like my son Ben, he wouldn't go to the doctor. He'd been told he got high blood pressure, he'd got to get it down, but nobody had followed it up, and so he hadn't got it down, I don't believe, although he told me he had because he wanted to get me off his back because I was worried about a stroke, actually. I wasn't, because I'd never heard of aortic dissection. And he told me that his blood pressure had gone down, but it obviously hadn't, and that's what caused it. The symptoms can be all sorts of things. You can have pain in the chest, you can have pain in the abdomen, have pain in the shoulders, you can have pain in the jaw. But apparently it is excruciating. And that's why you go to hospital in the first place. The problem is, the paramedics are probably the first people that see you in extreme pain. They take you into hospital and they have handover notes. But because A&E consultants are often very busy, they don't always read the handover notes. And once the initial pain, which is the initial tear in the aorta, has gone through, you don't necessarily have a lot of pain then. And I think that's what happened to Ben. I think he'd stopped having the pain and he couldn't explain what it was because the blood was no longer getting to his brain, so he couldn't remember why he'd gone in there. It also wasn't getting to his organs because it couldn't pump round the body, and therefore the organs were starting to shut down, which is what happened to him in the end. It is quite a difficult disease to be able to diagnose, but what we're doing is we're providing funding for training, we're providing funding for research so that more people understand about it and how we can diagnose it better so that fewer families actually go through the pain that we did.
So is this like a time critical in terms of kind of discovering the symptoms and getting people to be aware, like the doctors understanding that it's what it is, because it seems like
it is.
You've got to like quickly.
It is time critical. There are some people where it hasn't been a very bad issue, and they can be medically managed, which means they reduce the blood pressure and keep them monitored. So there isn't, because the aorta is the biggest vessel in the body, and the pressure on it as the blood is being pumped around is huge. So if you can keep the blood pressure down, there's less pressure. But sometimes you can see a bulge on the aorta. I mean, I've got a bulge, but they're monitoring it. As they do, if somebody's had one, usually first degree relatives are monitored, like I've been, my husband has, my other son and daughter have, and Ben's children have. And I'm the only one that's got a bit of a bulge. But they're monitoring it. I have scans regularly to check that it's not getting worse. So that's really important, but you can manage it. There's a DJ on Radio 2 called Whispering Bob Harris, which you're much too young to know anything about. He was a big star in the 60s and 70s, did the old grey whistle test. He's living with an aortic dissection. There's another, and he's one of our ambassadors. And then Steve Perryman, who was a footballer, played for England and captain Tottenham Hotspur for 8 years, I think, and played for 17. He's had surgery for him. And I think he now helps at Exeter. But he's another ambassador for us. So they go out talking about it, and Whispering Bob mentions it when he's on the radio being interviewed always, to make people realise that high blood pressure is dangerous. It's not just strokes, it is aortic dissection, and nobody wants to have that sudden death in their family, and it can affect people from 17 to 90. So it's irrespective of age, it's irrespective of wealth, it's irrespective of colour or creed, it doesn't matter. You can be anybody with it, so we do have to raise awareness. But also, the more funding we can raise, the more likely we are to find a way of tracking it and making sure people don't have it. There's something, which I don't really understand, called a biomarker, which is in the blood. It's a very medical thing. That if we could track that down, they could just do a simple blood test and find out if you're predisposed to it. So then they might look at it more seriously.
Wow, okay. So is this is it an hereditary condition that's kind of passed through the bloodline, or is it something that you can just build up through just high blood pressure and bad health and bad habits and stress as well?
It isn't necessarily bad habits. My son was very fit. He played squash a couple of times a week, played five-a-side football. He was a big guy. He was 6'5", very tall. He had a very active life. I mean, he was never still. He was always busy. So it is more about keeping the blood pressure down. It can be hereditary. There are these other conditions that are predispose you to have it, and particularly a thing called Marfan syndrome. And there's this Ehlers-Danlos, and there's 2 or 3 others that mean you're more likely, but not definitely going to have one. So yes, it can be, and that's why they screen first degree relatives. That's why I've been screened, because my blood pressure's been a bit high, so I'm keeping that down now to make sure my bulge doesn't get any bigger, because we don't want that to happen, because it could tear at any time if it did get bigger.
So you say you could tear and stuff like that, but how can we manage the condition? Can we treat it? Is it exercise? Can excessive exercise if you have got the condition, can excessive exercise kind of put more strain on that aortic dissection? It
could do. It's funny because I think there's some aortic dissections that are never diagnosed after death. I think if somebody's run a marathon and then they've dropped dead, I think sometimes the coroner will think it's just a heart attack and put too much pressure on the body. but it could be an aortic dissection. So I think although we know that there are 2,000 people die from an undiagnosed or misdiagnosed aortic dissection a year, I think there's more than that, because some GPs don't really know about it. Some people in A&E, because they're so busy, they have to think of everything from a ingrown toenail to open heart surgery. You know, the things that they have to eliminate when they see a patient is very quick that they have to do it. They don't have a lot of time. So all these doctors and paramedics and everybody who sees a patient, we have to make them more aware that they need to look at this and rule it out. And there are some tests they can do that can help to rule it out. For instance, sometimes an aortic dissection patient has different blood pressure in each arm. So if they take the blood pressure in one arm and then do the other arm, and they're different, that might trigger their thought process to think, could this be an aortic dissection? And I think that's what we want people to do. We want medics to rule it out by having thought about it. But the only true way of discovering if it is an aortic dissection is a scan, a CT scan of the chest. Now in Ben's case, they did a CT scan of his head, but not his chest. Had they done that, they could have acted and they could have done the surgery and he might still be here. Interestingly enough, the surgery is massive. I mean, it can be up to 12 hours. It's really massive surgery and quite dangerous, and some people don't get through that. So we wouldn't save all 2,000, but I think we'd save a substantial number if we had more research and more funding for training. We're training some aortic nurses very soon. We're going to have a conference so that the aortic dissection nurses can learn more about it so that they understand what it's like to live with one. Because apparently, if you've had one and you're being medically monitored, it's quite scary because you never know when it's going to happen again.
So where can we find further information about the charity and finding out more information about symptoms and getting to understand this charity?
All you have to do is go on the web, www.the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust, which is a bit of a clunky name, but it is what it is, and it tells you everything you need to know about what we're doing, how we're spending the funding that we are getting, the educational materials that we have. There's an animation there that explains all about aortic dissection. And what we want to do is more people to have a look at it so they can see. We've actually got somebody running the marathon for us again this year, different person. And we have many people who do things that we don't even know because they've lost somebody, usually because they've lost somebody. And they're amazing. They raise money for us all the time. And we don't actually raise money ourselves, because we're busy doing the training and education, but there's lots of material on the website that people can go and look at. And you know, my daughter-in-law, Ben's wife, did a fundraiser. He would have been 50 on the 28th of February, and she did a big walk and raised £2,500, which is phenomenal, just from ordinary people walking and doing things and donating to the charity.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. So as the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust is our chosen charity for the year, we look forward to organising some events and fundraising ideas. So we'll update you on the progress throughout the year, and thank you very much.